Oh, wow. especially indigenous.
Environmental harm children are demanding
work together to make sure to listening to for action. They have created an important document called the journal. It explains important to say that all children's rights are connected and equally important. However, this means the warming of a planet. It also means
Okay, as people are starting to trickle in, thank you so much for coming back during lunch. Okay, we will begin this session, which is the side event. So thank you, good afternoon, distinguished representatives, and welcome to this side event. This is on tackling the 3 planetary environmental crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution through implementation of the UN General Assembly resolution on the right to a healthy environment. Thank you very much for joining the event over lunch, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. My name is Georgina Lloyd, and I am the Regional Coordinator for Environmental Law and Governance in the Asia Pacific Regional Office of the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. I'm based in Bangkok. UNEP is organizing this event, recognizing that implementing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and having a rights-based approach is essential to achieve multilateral actions which are indeed effective, inclusive, and sustainable and leave no one behind. During this event, we will hear good practices at the national and regional levels, promoting and protecting the right to a healthy environment, to promote environmental rights, and environmental rule of law in Asia and the Pacific. This session will also increase shared actions to implement the UN General Assembly resolution in order to tackle the triple planetary crisis. To start this session, I am delighted to invite Ms. Marlene Nielsen, the Deputy Regional Director of the UNEP Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to provide some opening remarks. Marlene, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who are online, I don't know if it's morning, afternoon, evening, but welcome to you all. Mr. Supan Patrigay, the Chairman of Central Environment Authority of Sri Lanka, Ms. Twasi Tiwok, the Director for the Department of Environmental Protection and Conservation of Vanuatu, and panelists, colleagues, and friends. In the past couple of years, 2 historical resolutions have been adopted. One by the United Nations General Assembly and the other by the United Nations Human Rights Council. These resolutions have made it clear that we have a right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The United Nations General Assembly resolution recognizes that human rights and the environment are intertwined. Human rights cannot be enjoyed without a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and sustainable environmental governance cannot exist without the establishment of and respect for human rights. Adopting rights-based approaches is critical for addressing the triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution and chemical waste. Adopting a rights-based approach is also crucial for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. Excellencies, colleagues, I'm afraid I have some bad news when it comes to the SDGs. There remain significant implementation gaps towards achievement of all SDGs in Asia and Pacific region. Last year, the midpoint of the SDGs, there was only almost 14% progress towards all SDGs. These implementation gaps have negative impacts on people, especially on groups in vulnerable situations. Women, children, indigenous people continue to experience barriers to environmental justice. Civic space is continuing to shrink globally and in the region. Environmental human rights defenders, including indigenous people, youth, women, and many other groups already in vulnerable situations are facing harassment and violence. Last year, at least 16 environmental defenders were killed in Asia and the Pacific. The General Assembly resolution recognizes the right to a healthy environment acts as a foundation stone for sustainable development and good environmental governance. Upholding this right will enable the achievement of environmental justice and participatory decision-making processes. The General Assembly resolution called on all stakeholders to adopt policies to enhance international cooperation, strengthen capacity building, and to continue to share good practices in order to scale up efforts to ensure a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment for all. In order for all stakeholders to implement in line with this resolution, it is necessary to fully understand the nature of this right. The right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is generally understood to involve substantive and procedural elements which are equally important and interdependent. The substantive elements include clean air, a safe climate, access to safe water and adequate sanitation, healthy and sustainable produced food, non-toxic environments in which we live, work, study, and play, and healthy biodiversity and ecosystems. The procedural elements include access to information, the right to participate in decision-making, and access to justice and effective remedies. Within this event, we will explore approaches, actions, and legal solutions to implement the right to a healthy environment for everyone, everywhere. As my boss, UNGA Anderson, the United Nations Environment Program Executive Director, has said, if nations implement this right fully, it will change so much. By empowering action of the triple planetary crisis, providing a more predictable and consistent global regulatory environment for businesses, and protecting those who defend nature. It is no longer a matter of if the right to a healthy environment should be implemented, but how. And action is already being taken. The right is being reflected in the multilateral agreements such as the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The right is already being upheld by youth in courtrooms. The right is being further protected through regional frameworks such as the ongoing process to develop the ASEAN Environmental Rights Framework. The right is being reflected in policy instruments at the national level and in constitutions. Despite these positive developments, further action is needed to make the right a reality for all. And I want to reassure this room and those who are online, joining us online, that we at the United Nations Environment Program, we remain committed to supporting you, member states, and all stakeholders in Asia and the Pacific as we implement this vital right. I look forward to hearing perspectives from a range of stakeholders here today and accelerating implementations for a sustainable future for people and the planet. I thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. I would now like to invite Supan Patrigay, who is chairman of the Central Environmental Authority, to provide remarks on behalf of His Excellency Nesa Ahmad, the Minister of Environment of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. Ms. Marlene Nelson, Deputy Regional Director of UNEP, and Ms. Taushi Tiwak, the Director, Department of Environment Protection and Conservation. Respected dignitaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and the participants from online. So it's my great pleasure to speak in this side event on behalf of the Minister of Environment, Sri Lanka, Mr. Nasir Ahmed. So upholding the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is crucial as it has far-reaching implications of human well-being, ecological balance, and the future of our planet. Realizing this right is essential for climate justice, for food security, for health and health of our communities. The impacts of environment harm on globe are not evenly distributed. Yet, everybody, everywhere deserve to live in a healthy environment. It requires all governments, businesses, civil societies, and more importantly, individuals to work together to ensure that the right can be realized. Importantly, in the context of this forum, multilateral cooperation is need to ensure that environmental issues when transcend national boundaries can be addressed. We are here to explore how to accelerate the implementation of right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, recognizing the implementing this right is not only alignment with global recognition through UN General Assembly, but it is also practical necessity for the sustainability and prosperous future. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as the Ministry of Environment, we think legal framework play an important role in providing and enabling environment for realizing of the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. From constitutional provisions to national legislations, these instruments are the foundation for protection and enforcement of environment rights. Many constitutions around the world recognize the right to healthy environment, and where this right is not explicitly provided. Often, jurisdiction has evolved in interpret the right to a healthy environment within other fundamental rights such as right to life and right to equality. We have indeed seen this within the Sri Lankan context. In our constitution, 27/14, it ensures that government shall protect and preserve the environment for general public. And in the vice versa, in the same constitution, 28F, it says the duty of all citizens to protect and safeguard the environment. So the commitment of the government as well as the commitment of the civil societies and individuals are in our constitution. Furthermore, many constitutions impose a duty on state to protect the environment for the benefit of present and future generations. Such a duty can now be interpreted alongside to recognize human right to healthy environment. Policy instruments, including national strategies and action plans, can also embed the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, supporting implementations. Examples including in cooperation with climate policies or national biodiversity strategies. And such policies should incorporate the right of access to information, public participation, and access to justice in order to address the disproportionate vulnerabilities of impacted communities. While government are key stakeholders in the implementation of the right to healthy environment, collective action is necessary, and I highlight again, the collective action is necessary and will have greater impact. For example, actions taken by businesses can ensure the right in advance to responsible business practices. I believe during the panel discussion, we will hear the different ways in which actions is being taken to implement the right to healthy environment. I look forward to these discussions and in particular explorations of the interconnections between implementation, the right to the healthy environment, and address the climate injustice. Both climate justice and environmental rights promote accountability within environmental matters. The government of Sri Lanka will further host an event on climate justice on 5th October, day after tomorrow, to address the unfairness associated with climate change and the impacts on disadvantaged and marginal communities. So in conclusion, Sri Lanka, we have developed National Environmental Action Plan 2022 to 2030. In that action plan, we have addressed 10 areas, which are air quality, biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, climate action for sustainability, conservation and sustainable marine and coastal reserves, sustainable land use management, holistic waste management, integrated water management, and greening the industries. So we have identified the strategies and which action should be taken to make the reality of clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So I thank for joining and hope everybody will share their national and regional good practices, action implemented, and action to be implemented for promote and protect the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We're now going to turn to the panel discussion, and we're going to be joined by 4 incredible speakers who all bring unique and important perspectives to this session. I would like to invite them to join me up on stage. We have Ms. Tuasitiwak, who is the Director of the Department of Environmental Protection and Conservation from Vanuatu. We have Aniva, who is a part of the Children's Advisory Team of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child for General Comment 26 on children's rights and the environment from Samoa. We have Mr. Prem Singh Tharu from the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact based in Thailand. He's Prem. And we have Mr. Hemantha Vithange, who's from the Center for Environmental Justice in Sri Lanka. Please, Hemantha. Thank you very much for all joining this panel discussion. So I'm going to turn first to Ms. Tiwak. Ms. Tiwak, the Republic of Vanuatu is leading globally the initiative at the UN International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion on the obligations of states relevant to climate action. Jurisprudence and court decisions, as we have heard just from the first speakers, have been significant in many jurisdictions in advancing the implementation of the right to a healthy environment through climate justice for both current and future generations. Ms. Tiwak, can you please share with us your perspectives on this? Would you like to speak from the chair? Or up to you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. A very good, warm, good afternoon to you all. And I take this opportunity to also thank the Sri Lanka government for the hospitality that's been provided. Vanuatu takes a stand in its perspective to bring the whole world to understand that we are not doing enough. We are not doing enough to actually meet the obligations under the Paris Agreement. Nothing's really been done. We know this is the fact. The science has proven it, and all the data around us is going towards this. We know the world has warmed 1.1 Celsius since the Industrial Revolution. Human greenhouse gases emissions are responsible primarily due to the combustion of fossil fuels. On 29th of March, 2023, the UNGA adopted the resolution 77276 by consensus, requesting the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion on the obligations of states in relation to climate change. That same month, Vanuatu was hit by 2 Category 4 cyclones within 72 hours of each other. We were already ranked #1 country in the world at risk under the World Risk Report 2021. The IPCC AR6 reports and the technical reports of the global stocktake make it clear that ambitious, scaled, and effective climate action by all nations has never been more urgent. We are not on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. NDCs are inadequate, and G20 governments spent US $1.4 trillion on subsidies to fossil fuels sectors in 2022. $100 billion per year to finance has not been fully delivered. We are 16 billion short, again, focused on mitigation finance, loans, climate finance, middle-income countries in Asia. So the ICJ process is currently underway, and in 2020, on the 22nd of January, 2023, national written statements on the legal questions and international obligations can also be requested to the registrar as we speak. In 2020, on the 22nd of April, submissions have been written and comments on the written statements made by other states and organizations. So what are we hoping to get out of this? The anticipated impact and legal outcomes of this ICJ opinion. The legal conclusions sought through the ICJ advisory opinion will provide legal clarity under the law of state responsibility in relation to states' duties to comply with their primary obligations, i.e. treaty obligations. Causation and attributions of impacts leading to cessation of ongoing violations. Legal consequences for the breaches, including reparations. An advisory opinion from the ICJ is not litigation. It's not legally binding. There are no wins or losses, no awards or damages. But the legal conclusion sought are climate obligations exist under a range of treaties and customary international law beyond the UNFCCC. States have breached the existing international obligations with unlawful conduct related to greenhouse gases emissions, which have injured and harmed us and our people and individuals of present and future generations. There are legal consequences of this unlawful conduct, which we expect the court to find will result in a duty of compliance with their primary obligation, a cessation of any ongoing violations, provide full repatriations as defined by the law of state of responsibility. Apart from all this that we're doing in our processes to ICJ, we also have other legal initiatives to address this climate harm that all of us are facing. We have gone into the process of a UNFCCC NDC ambition, a revised and enhanced NDC, including loss and damage in our 2022 revised. In March 2023, Vanuatu and 5 other Pacific nations made a call for a new treaty and a fossil fuel-free Pacific, a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Vanuatu is also leading on the International Criminal Court of Assembly of States to consider adding the crime of ecocide to its governing document, the Roman Statute, a crime of ecocide at the International Court of Court. The Commission of Small Island States on Climate Change and International Law, Vanuatu has joined Antigua and Barbuda, Tuvalu, and Palau in efforts to explore legal mechanisms to address climate harm under the law of the sea and other conventions. So it's imperative. We can't just sit and wait for something to happen. Taking this to the highest level of court will give us the opportunity to seek what we have been trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tiwok. And I would also like to acknowledge the role of children and youth in this movement to bring the case to the International Court of Justice, starting from a group of law students at the University of the South Pacific. Our next speaker is a shining light amongst young voices, speaking on behalf of the environment. It is truly an honor to have Aniva joining us. Aniva is a child advisor to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child in the preparation of General Comment 26 on children's rights and the environment with a special focus on climate change. She is also an environmental activist from Samoa. Aniva, can you please share with us some ways that we can ensure that children are at the center? What are some initiatives and approaches to implement and realize the right to a healthy environment, particularly children's rights to a healthy environment? Thank you.
Alofa lava, everyone. My name is Aniva, and I'm a child advisor for General Comment 26, which was officially launched very recently on the 18th of September of this year in Geneva. So to begin, we will watch an animated video put together by the incredible General Comment team, as well as the Children's Advisory team, which explains more about General Comment and gives you a bit of an introduction to what it is and how it can be used.
Every child on this planet has rights. Children's rights are what all children need to live a safe, healthy, and happy life. But across the world, there's a big problem. Environmental harm and climate change are threatening children's rights globally. Children are demanding action now.
The United Nations Committee on the Rights of a Child is a group of 18 experts who work together to make sure countries keep their promises to protect children's rights. Listening to children's call for action, they have created an important document called the General Comment number 26. It explains how children's rights are connected to the environment and climate change, and what government must do to protect the rights of children today and children in the future.
Children have played a very important role in making this general comment. In fact, we are 12 members of Children's Advisory Team that has worked with TIIKM to support the committee to create it. Part of our role was to create ways for other children to have their say on what should be included in the document. 16,331 children from 121 countries got involved.
So, what does the general comment tell us? Well, before we dive in, it is important to say that all children's rights are connected and equally important. However, some rights are particularly threatened by environmental harm and climate change. Some rights also play a big role in helping to protect children's rights, but we will tell you a bit more about that in just a moment.
The committee explains that children have the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. This means children should be able to live and grow up in safe climates and non-polluted environments. Children should have access to healthy ecosystems, clean air and water, safe, healthy food, and decent housing. They should also be able to learn, play, and be active in places safe from environmental harm.
The committee tells government that they must make bold steps so children can experience their right. This means taking urgent action to limit the warming of our planet. It also means making sure children are not living in poverty or unsafe conditions and providing access to healthcare, support, and justice for children facing physical and mental health issues, violence or harm because of environmental harm or climate change.
When making decisions about the environment and climate change, governments must think about how all children will be impacted today and in the future. They must take extra care to not negatively affect children, especially Indigenous children, children of minority groups, children with disabilities, and children living in places more affected by disasters and climate change who are often more impacted. Governments must also make sure businesses do not harm the environment and have negative impacts on children's lives too.
Governments must work together with other governments because environmental problems
do not stop at a country's border. Countries that are most responsible for environmental harm and climate change should take more action and support countries that are impacted the most. And very importantly, governments should take children's views and ideas seriously. Children should be involved when making decisions about the environment and climate change and give feedback to children about how their views were considered.
También deben asegurarse de que los niños y niñas puedan acceder a información y educación claras y precisas sobre el medio ambiente y el clima, para que sepan lo que está ocurriendo y lo que pueden hacer para formar parte de las soluciones necesarias.
And in fact, this is why the general comment is so important. It is not just for adults to read and act on. It is for us, children, to use as well. By better understanding how our rights are connected to the environment and climate change, we can speak up for our rights and hold government accountable when they do not respect and act upon the promises they have made to us. Together, we can make a difference.
So, let's stand up for our rights, protect our planet, and make sure every child grows up in the happy, healthy, and safe world.
Yeah, so I hope that that video, if you didn't know much about general comment, gives you a bit of a background behind it as we continue to talk about it in this discussion. So there are many reasons as to why General Comment 26 is so significant and important. Firstly, it provides an opportunity for governments to ensure that children's rights are upheld in relation to the climate crisis. However, if governments around the world do not seize the opportunity of upholding the authoritative guidance that has been outlined in General Comment 26, in which every country in the Asia Pacific region have ratified in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, they will be held accountable. Secondly, General Comment 26's emphasis, in which clearly stating that governments should immediately phase out fossil fuels to address the climate crisis, is also a crucial aspect in which I want to highlight. The need to phase out fossil fuels is a pressing and immediate issue that we must address. Oh yes, next slide. The huge anticipation and media coverage General Comment 26 has received during both its formulation over the past 18 months, as well as now that it has freshly been launched, demonstrates not only the significance of General Comment 26, but also the calls from our communities across the world for authoritative guidance to guide our governments into addressing environmental issues through children's rights. Throughout the development of General Comment 26, children have been at the center and the focus. Through both having our children's advisory team, as well as extensive consultations with over 16,300 children worldwide, children have played an influential role in the formulation of General Comment 26. General Comment 26 has demonstrated and proven that children need to be involved in meaningful ways. They need to be at the center, and that children's viewpoints need to be genuinely considered and acted upon in any context. General Comment 26's unique process demonstrates the power of working and collaborating with children. The process of formulating General Comment 26 shows that children being put at the front and center of climate decisions can be done. And General Comment itself states that children being put at this front and center of climate decisions must be done. It is also crucial that we understand when discussing youth participation in all areas, and particularly in child rights, we must also say child. We must ensure we include children, which is anyone under the age of 18. Children are our future, and decisions must not be made without the input and collaboration of children. Children are human beings and have rights now. While I have discussed General Comment 26 and why governments must uphold it, I believe it is also crucial that we recognize our why. Why must we take immediate climate action Why are we implementing these changes? Our people, our environment, our future. My people, the Pacific peoples, are at the forefront of the climate crisis. Sea level rise, coral bleaching, rising temperatures, and loss of biodiversity are just some of the impacts of climate change being felt already. Climate change is not something that we can continue to sit in air-conditioned powered rooms where we just talk, because talk does not solve these life-threatening and ecologically damaging issues. Leaders must start taking a step further and ensure that implementation of laws, policies, and regulations are brought forth immediately. So, in saying that, I want to share a Psalm 1 proverb with you. E lelele toloa ai ma'aulava ilevai, which literally means that the toloa bird will fly far from its waters, but will always return to its home. For us as Pacific people, if we lose our homes due to sea level rise, we will no longer have a home to return to. In concluding my discussion today, I want to leave you with one last food for thought. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. The land does not belong to us, but we belong to the land. Finally, I would also like to mention that if you would like to talk further about General Comment 26, please feel free to come talk to our General Comment team who are waving their hands now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aniva. And I also want to acknowledge that we have not only one child advisor, but two child advisors with us. So I would also like to acknowledge Katik, who is also part of the child advisory team. Thank you. So now turning to Prem. Prem, Indigenous peoples are at the forefront of conservation. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, have reported that lands, resources, and territories traditionally owned by Indigenous peoples house much of the world's biodiversity. And Indigenous peoples continue to act as guardians, as they have for centuries, for a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. They are champions of upholding the right to a healthy environment. So Prem, how can stakeholders support efforts to safeguard Indigenous lands, resources, and territories to implement the right to a healthy environment for everyone, everywhere?
Thank you, Josie, and good evening, everyone, here again. I think after lunch, a bit sleepy as well. That's the impact of food. Yes, here we are talking about three planetary environmental crises: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And also we are talking about here safeguarding indigenous lands, resources, and territories. So climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, all those things are happening because of the exploitation of the land, resources, and territories. And those exploitations are being done by the new development activities. And those development activities, they are not keeping in their mind that it's going to make the environmental crisis, means it's going to boost to the climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So it's not only in the indigenous land, territories, and resources, everywhere they're doing. But at least in the indigenous land and territories, there are very strong indigenous practices. There are very strong indigenous institutions, indigenous customary practices. And those institutions, those practices are there because of the collective approach of indigenous people, collective efforts of the indigenous people. And where there are indigenous people, in those areas, there are lots of natural resources. there are minerals, there are means many kinds of natural resources. So in order to extract those natural resources, developments are being taken place there, means industries are being established. And those industries, those companies are gearing up their activities without any free, prior, and informed consent. Means they are not respecting to the due diligence. They are not respecting to the environmental human rights. They are not respecting to the rights of the indigenous people. They are not respecting to the, means the right of the nature, right to the nature. So while ignoring all these things, all those activities are not just only displacing to the indigenous peoples, not only means violating the rights of indigenous peoples regarding their practice of indigenous knowledge, practice of their customary institutions, practice of their skills, practice of their arts, practice of their livelihoods, practice of their agriculture. But it is in a multiple way, it is violating their rights. Means in order to extract those natural resources from the indigenous land and territories, there are being mobilized the militaries. Means those areas are being declared as the conservation areas. In the name of conservation, they are free to do their activities. They are free to extract the activities, means extract the resources. They say this is the conservation areas, but they have been doing many activities, by denying the, access of those resources to the indigenous people and to other people. And in the name of green economy, in the name of tourism development, they are grabbing those land, territory, and resources from indigenous peoples, which are really naturally beautiful, naturally rich with resources. So these challenges are there. And why indigenous knowledge are very important to protect the indigenous land, territories, and resources? Because the source of indigenous knowledge, the source of indigenous arts, cultures are the natural resources, are the nature, are the land, are the, means air, water, trees, and different other resources. Those indigenous knowledge are only surviving because of all those natural resources. That's why indigenous peoples, they are really committed. They are really, means having the strong and inherent relationship with those natural resources. That's why the natural resources are alive in those indigenous land, territories, and resources. And the indigenous customary institutions, which are governing those land, territories, and resources, have very democratic practices, means practice of the self-determination, practice of the self-governance, that encourage the community, that inspire the communities to exercise the collective efforts. Means safeguarding of the land, territory, and resources are not possible in an individual. There must be collective effort. So the world have to learn from the indigenous people that there is a need of collective approach to protect, to safeguard the land, territories, and resources. If we really want to address the 3 planetary crises, means climate change, biodiversity, and pollution, there must be the collective efforts. And in the name of nature-based solutions, means the best way forward to promote the corporate capture, they should learn from the indigenous peoples. They should learn from the communities how they have been protecting their land, territories, and resources since ages, since time immemorial. And in the name of ecosystem restoration, in the name of water action decade, in the name of SDG 2030 agenda, they have to learn from the indigenous communities and communities who have been doing that practices since ages. They never use the term sustainable development. They never use the term ecosystem restoration. They never use the term nature-based solution. But all those systems, all those knowledge and practices, they have. And they have been doing that. So where these planetary crises are coming, it's not coming from those indigenous land and territories, but it is coming by, or it is being, it is being pronounced by those corporates who have been doing the exploitation of all those land territories and resources. So very important thing is our state parties, our governments, our nations, they have to recognize the indigenous peoples, their indigenous knowledge, practices, their customary institutions, and their self-governance practices, self-determination. And it's also very important to always respect the human rights-based approach and to adopt in their policy and practices. And also, this this clean and healthy environment is not just the human right. In the national constitution, our countries, our nations, they have to endorse it as the fundamental human rights, as the fundamental rights. If we really want to see the effective implementation of healthy environment, healthy planet as the human right, it must be in our fundamental human rights. It must be in our fundamental rights of the constitution in a strong position and provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Prem. And last, but certainly not least, Hemantha. As Malin said earlier, it is no longer a question of if we implement the right to a healthy environment, but how. So my question to you, Hemantha, is how? How can states, international organizations, business enterprises, and all relevant stakeholders scale up efforts to ensure a healthy environment for all? What do we need to do to drive implementation of the UN General Assembly resolution? Over to you.
Aibuan, welcome to my beautiful country, Sri Lanka. I'm the chair of the Friends of the Earth International and also the founder and senior advisor to the Center for Environmental Justice, which is a local organization engaged in environmental litigation, mostly on litigation. I joined the environmental work in 1990. And by that time, I already thought that the right to healthy, clean and healthy environment is already been accepted by the United Nations. But it took 32 years for them to understand the importance of the right to environment, right to clean and healthy environment. Perhaps my work also has contributed to this decision. I think many in the room may have contributed to this decision. We all know that there are triple planetary crises we are talking, and last month, Sri Lanka was suffering from a drought. And the people in the downstream, so they came to the upstream demanding water from a reservoir. Does the government have water to provide? Because the government doesn't have water unless it comes from the rain. It's a natural system. So we can make certain things right, but we also need to make sure that if you want to make sure that and entertain that right, then you have to protect the other rights, others' rights as well. The right to nature, right to environment, rights of the environment, rights of nature. These are interconnected stories. So you cannot ensure the right to healthy environment unless you agree on rights of nature. So these are connected, interconnected. Do we have right to water? Even in our constitution, we don't have right to life. So these are connected, and also I think these are collective rights. These are not necessarily individual rights, although you have the right, you can call them as the individual rights, but these are collective rights we are talking. So the people need to understand it's not only the government, but also we also have the responsibility to deal with these issues. In my organization, for the last 20 years, we have filed more than 400 environmental cases. And right now we have 36 environmental cases pending in the courts in Sri Lanka. My point is actually, in Sri Lanka, we have more than 100 laws, 100 environmental laws. Central Environmental Authority has the major law, National Environmental Act they are implementing. But the forest ordinance, we have the wildlife, we have municipalities who are dealing with the garbage. That's also environmental law. And we filed many of the cases under the public nuisance actions, you know, under the criminal penal code. So therefore, although you have these different type of laws in the country, they are just there unless you implement. So my point is actually, you can have a clean and healthy environment as a right, so you can accept at the international level, but unless you bring it down to the local level, unless you implement them, unless it becomes part and parcel of your day-to-day rights package, then these things cannot ensure the right to environment. So my environmental cases in Sri Lanka have built different things. Now, for example, in 1999, we filed the case against a phosphate, privatizing a phosphate mine, and the case order say that natural resources are not owned by the government, it's owned by the people, and government is only the trustee, which is one of the important things that you need to understand if you want to entertain this right to environment or right to clean and healthy environment. And some of our cases have brought lead paint standard about the paint, the paint when we tested originally, 135,000 parts per million lead we found in wall paint, emulsion paint. And we brought it down to 90 parts per million. And in other lacquers, we have 600 parts per million. Unless you brought this to the court of law, you won't get this practice. You won't get this standard in the country. And some of our cases have brought the genetically modified food labeling into the country. And we have one other case, we have a visual pollution regulation. And the waste management policy. One of the cases we filed in 2017 resulted the waste management policy in the country. So my point is actually, unless you practice at the national level, of course, at the regional, global levels, very important, you can make all decisions, but if you want your community to entertain these rights, and if you want your community to feel the importance of these and also the protection which they brought, you have to bring and implement at the national level. So my few suggestions for future, one is engaging decisions. Now, we do at the international level, we do it at the national level. We are part of the steering committees, various steering committees, including the Plastic Steering Committee, Minamata Steering Committee, and we are part of many of the steering committees. So that's how you can work together with the governor. Of course, in many of our cases, the government agencies, including the Central Environmental Authority, is one of the agency which we have filed the legal action. But at the same time, we work with the government. I think this combination is quite important if you want to bring this law to the country. Citizen science is quite important. So unless you bring the citizen science, unless you develop your own data, it won't happen. So you need to have the data. Implementing laws, because the laws are there, but unless you practice them, unless you educate people how to practice this law, they are just in the law book. So you have to practice them. And if you bring a case to the court, only the judges can deliver a good judgment. Unless there's somebody to do this part, the law is there and the courts are there, but nothing will happen on the ground. So the organizing community is also quite important. But at the same time, defending defenders, which is one of the area quite important. And you, madam, you mentioned about that how many people were killed because fighting to protect the environment. In certain years, I think maybe a few years back, there were more than 900 people were killed. Annually, roughly more than 500 people die because of defending the environment. So unless we defend the defenders, this world is going to be a very bad place for environmental rights, including media people. So I think that's quite important. When we want to practice certain things, so of course, the courts can provide certain things, but at the same time, the human rights commissions in the national level. So they're quite important, but they have a very limited focus. I think in the resolution in the international level, what my appeal to the UN bodies and to all in the room, that yes, we can advocate for a better policies, resolutions, legally binding instruments, like, for example, which is going to happen on the plastic issue. And we are also talking about the legally binding treaty on the transnational corporations. And these are quite important. But the practice is on the ground. If you don't invest money, if you don't build the capacity, if you don't train the younger generation to take this further, if you don't educate people on what is on the paper, if you don't help the countries like the developing countries to build their capacity, these decisions may not be quite useful. You know, everybody on the plastic, everybody knows that how it is bad. But in my country, we have a hard time banning. We have a hard time bringing the laws like the extended producer responsibility. And we have a hard time even convincing the people how it is bad. Everybody say plastic is bad, but everybody want to use the lunch sheets. Everybody want to use the shopping bags to carry their goods. Even last 2 years, we have been fighting in the court. The government agencies have agreed that, so they want to change the consumer affairs law, because the consumer affairs law says that you have to give a bag in order to carry all these goods you buy. But now we are in the court. The government agencies have agreed that they will change the law, but still the Attorney General's Department have failed to inform the court that they are ready to change the law in the country. So some of these weaknesses, because of that weakness, every day we are dumping 30 million shopping bags to the Sri Lankan environment. So who is responsible? Maybe just one person. Maybe just one person. But unfortunately, implementation needs a lot of commitment from each of us. So it's not only the government agencies, but also the people. So if you want to make sure that right to clean and healthy environment actually benefiting the people, current generation, future generation, and not only that, and we cannot entertain that without protecting the nature and the ecosystem. So you have to understand this collectively. It is not single right, but it's a collective thing. So I think realizing the weight of this and the importance of this language, maybe it's just 1 or 2 lines. It's a one line actually the agreement, but it has very broad repercussions, and also so we have to make sure that we bring it down to the ground. Unless these resolutions may not be very helpful for people and the planet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the panelists. The messages are very clear. We need international normative advice and decisive advice, and that is going to be coming through the International Court of Justice and the advisory opinion. We must have children participation, as children are the future, and have a strong voice in the solutions that we need. We must ensure that there is support for Indigenous lands, resources, and territories if we are to protect the right to a healthy environment. And Hemantha, we must have implementation, and we must have implementation on the ground and at the grassroots. And this is a number of different stakeholders that must ensure that implementation: individuals, government agencies, judges, environmental authorities, and others. So thank you very much for all of those key messages. I am very aware of the fact that we have the afternoon session of the Major Groups and Stakeholders Forum, and we have taken some time out of that very important agenda. But are we allowed to have 2 questions? Can we take 2 questions, and then we will resume the Major Groups and Stakeholders Forum? So I will open that up. Thank you for the nods of the head. I will open up for 2 questions, if we have any from the floor. And if there is a question online, can someone please indicate that? So yes, I see 1 question at the back. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for an opportunity. I think this is very important moment. I would like to advocate to UN mechanism and give some of the question for not only for UN mechanism to think, but also a collective measure how to put everything that share on the floor into the collaborative action at country level, at field level, because so far, UN mechanism always working with the government, and we are just only friends sitting behind, but no significant participation in decision-making. Being UN mechanism, how can you ensure that we are not only advocate the point, what need to be promoted, but at the same time, collectively engage in the policy development and develop measures to make it happen at field level? So that would be my opinion, my question to UN. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Is there any other questions from the floor? Okay, I don't see any other questions. I think one of the key points, if I can respond first as the UN representative up on the floor, the right to a healthy environment includes not only those core substantive rights, but it also includes the procedural rights. And those are the rights to participation, the rights to information, and the rights to justice and remedy. And I think that is exactly what you're referring to. And many of our speakers today spoke about collaboration and the need for collective action, because realization of the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment cannot happen if action is only taken by one group of stakeholders or by stakeholders acting in silos. So collective action is essential. And indeed, working, I think Hemantha gave some really good examples actually of the way in which civil society is working with government to ensure implementation of specific government policies and regulations. And there are probably a number of other similar examples that the speakers can give. So maybe I open up to if anyone would like to also add something to that question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think in planning processes, I think in national governments, there are processes in place. I mean, for Vanuatu, we take the initiative to engage with all private sectors and government. It is important that you hear everyone at the place. And I think most of the speakers, as you heard, the final panelists also mentioned that as well. I think in Sri Lanka, that is something that we do. We should take it from now. We've learned that when one voice is missing, then the whole process that we're trying to take a vote is not going to work. And that should be the call that we're making now. And it shouldn't be just someone saying something. It should be everyone. We should take in indigenous, we should take the communities, we should take the government. While the government can develop policies, can make the stand, it's the people. It's the people at the community level that will be the ones that will take the blunt of all the policies that we develop. So it's important that we see it as a collective round of work that we need to do. And make sure that your voice is heard. I'm sure in all countries there is a process that is in place, and we don't just shut you out because you are not all good, all bad and good are important to be heard. And yes, and encourage yourself to say it in whatever platform that you're able to.
Yes, there are so many things that we all CSOs, means have been doing at the community level, means building capacity of the communities and informing them about different environmental issues and the challenges, including the existing laws and policies at national level, international level, and the practices. But when we talk about the implementation of the commitments or either binding or non-binding international laws and policies. So at the country level, we hardly find being endorsed at the national legislation or being implemented at the local level. So it's not only just the UN, but we also we CSOs we major groups from different constituencies we are belonging. We should also keep on raising all these issues for effective implementation. And implementation is not just for implementation. There should be effective and meaningful participation of the concerned communities and then groups across the process. That's why we talk about the free, prior, informed consent is really very important. Either it is formulation of any laws, policies, or implementation of any laws and policies. So it's, but again, it's not only an entity or one ministry or one department should take the lead from the government, but at the meantime, the government should coordinate and do the partnership with the CSOs working in the concerned field, and then also with the communities, whose participation are really important and instrumental to implement all those things. So if we again talk about all these planetary crises, then the victim is always at the end. We can find to the community people, either because of the climate change, they are being affected of their agricultural products, their crops are ready, they are ready to harvest, but either it is unpredicted rain or flood, or or any kinds of natural disaster it happens. So they the food which is ready to almost eat, they are losing that. And then it's not only that, there are many different kinds of disease that their crops are getting impacted. So there are so many things, also the health issues and all. So it's our responsibility also, we should be always raising all these issue in our different forums, either it is at national level or at the local level. Then I think it's possible, to establish what we really want, or what the UN process they really want to do. So it ultimately it should come at the collective way of working together. And another important thing, sometimes when we raise all this issue or demand all this issue, work together to protect the planet, to protect the forest, water resources and all. So the state our distinguished speaker Hevanthi was saying, we need to defend the rights of the defenders. So those are also the risks, and those risks are really critical. Sometimes we don't find the government responsible or accountable to protect or to respect the nature. Because of that, also sometimes the collective approach of working together with the communities also means finding a big gap. Means communities always away from all this process. That's why the challenges are also increasing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prem. So can I ask you all to give a big round of applause for all of our panelists? And thank you very much for joining us for this side event. Have a good afternoon.